Okay, so hello everyone, and welcome again to How to Concentrate Better While Reading. I'm your host, Paul Novak, and I'm the founder and program director here at IRIS. I want to thank you all again for attending. I see a lot of people have taken our course before, so thank you for taking our course in the past, and thanks for joining us today. We're going to talk today how to concentrate better while reading. How do we focus, improve our mental focus? And this is a problem that we hear over and over again, where people say, you know what? Even if you train them, because we do a lot of our speed reading courses in different cities and online, even if you train someone to read faster, if they don't have the ability to focus, then you know what? It doesn't even matter how fast you're going. You could be going slow or fast. If you're not focused, you're not going to remember anything. So concentration is really, really important. So that's going to be the subject of our webinar today. And I'm going to be going over a number of tips and ideas and strategies that I think you're going to find very helpful. So let's get right into it. Tip number one, focus on the task at hand. And what I mean by this is some people, they're trying to do too many things at once. And you might be studying for a test, but you've still got your phone on. Or you're trying to work on two different things at once. Maybe you're checking your email, and this is not always, you want to focus, you got to get some real reading done. And by that I mean maybe you're reading for a test, or maybe you're reading because you really need to know this information inside out, maybe for work, or just personally, you want to get this information and you don't want to spend a lot of time on it. You want to make sure that you're focusing on the task at hand. I know that's easier said than done, but this is what might be known as single tasking versus multitasking. Now, tip number two is get rid of distractions. So distractions are all over the place, and I mean, some common distractions, for example, I know the image you see right here, um, that makes it a little hard to shoot a free throw, huh? Well, some of these distractions you can get rid of. Some of them you can't. Like this picture, you can't really get rid of a guy wearing that. You can't get them out of the crowd. That's going to distract you. But with reading, there are distractions um, that you have control over. For example, having your phone on while reading. If you need to get some serious reading done and you need to know the information well and you really need to focus, you should be turning your phone off. I know that's really, really hard for some people to do. And actually, here's why it's hard, because people will come up with the excuse and they'll say, you know what, but maybe, what if somebody calls me and it's an emergency? Okay, if you're trying to get half an hour of reading done, the chances of an emergency happening within that half an hour are very, very slim. And also know that even if there was an emergency, getting to it in half an hour, not that much of a time delay. If you could turn off your phone, think about every time you get distracted while you're reading or when you're doing anything else. Doesn't it take you more time to kind of get back into, get back into focus mode, get back into the zone? And I think all of us would agree that, the phone can distract us. So turning off your phone, and it's not just from phone calls. Obviously, you might just be getting text messages. Um, I know some people that get text messages every 5, 10 minutes during the day. And imagine if you're getting text messages and you're a student and you've got to be doing, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours of reading in a day. Having your phone on is not going to help. That's a distraction you can easily get rid of, but some people have trouble because they've gotten used to having their phone on all the time. Here's how I would think of it. If you've got one of those smartphones, I've got a smartphone, and one of the things that bothers me is the battery life. Anyone that's got an Android device or maybe an iPhone knows this. The battery life sometimes isn't all that great. Well, think of it as a way to save your battery life, and you're limiting your distractions. So avoid distractions like that. Now, there are other distractions too. For example, being on the internet can be a distraction, right? The internet is a great tool, and it can also be a great tool to distract you. So, for example, some of the common distractions are email, right? Sometimes we have this urge to check email. Facebook, that's another distraction. Sometimes I know some people that are on Facebook maybe 10 times or more a day. Try to limit that if you can, or make sure that you're fighting that urge while you're trying to read. Some people check Facebook so often that they don't even realize, they just mindlessly will check. It's not just Facebook, it's a variety of other sites. Think of the websites that you visit the most. And those sites, you can think of them as distractions when you're trying to really get some reading done. I know, again, this is easier said than done, but one thing that you can do is you can just, let's say you're reading in a physical book, and by that I mean, we'll talk about reading on the computer screen in a little bit, but let's say you're reading a physical book, maybe it's a textbook, nonfiction, or maybe a novel. If you feel very distracted by the internet. Try turning off your internet connection for a moment. And you don't have to do this at the router. You could probably just do this with the Wi-Fi on your computer. Just turn it off for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And then you can get back to it. You'll find your focus improves. You'll be able to concentrate a lot better, and you won't have those urges. You won't be able to get on Facebook because when you try to get on, you'll think, oh yeah, I turned this off for a reason. And there's other sites that you could get distracted on. I'm not just trying to single out Facebook here, but Facebook, email, think of sites like YouTube, and many, many others that distract us very, very easily. We want to get rid of those distractions. Now, it's not just distractions on the internet. It's not just distractions by phone. What about people? I grew up, I've got 5 brothers. Most of them are younger than me. And when I was studying in, grade school, high school, and even part of college, I remember, always having to deal with a lot of people in the house. And it was very distracting because someone's always talking, even if you go in your room, and it's not easy to get rid of distractions like that. So what I would do is I would leave. I would go to maybe a coffee shop that was downtown. Or I remember going to Borders bookstore, which now is out of business, but I would go to a cafe and try to sit there and get my studying done and be distraction-free from people. Or if you get distracted easily at work, one other thing is to just sometimes politely ask people, hey, do you mind letting me focus for a little bit? I really need to be distraction-free for about 15 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever amount of time you need to read. Most people are going to be like, hey, yeah, no problem. I'll leave you alone. So make sure that you get rid of distractions. And again, I know this is easier said than done, but that's going to help you tremendously. There's a lot of distractions that we can limit. So let's talk about our next tip. Using your hand as a pacer. If you've been to one of our speed reading classes, this is one of the fundamental principles, one of the first things that you're taught as a speed reading 101 kind of basic. Use your hand as a pacer. Now, you could either use your finger, as you see on the picture right there, going from left to right, line by line, or you can use your entire hand, or if you want, you can use a pen. The whole point here is that your eyes are naturally attracted to motion. So when you're moving your hand along the page, your eyes are naturally going to follow. Now, the other thing is your eyes, when you point to something, they focus on it better. Let's say I asked you to pull out a book right now, a book that you have nearby or at home, and I asked you to count all the lines on the page. What would you probably do? You'd probably, use your finger or maybe a pen, and you'd kind of go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you'd be using your hand to kind of count the lines. You wouldn't just eyeball it, right? So using your hand helps you focus on, helps your eyes focus, and this is actually a very easy way to get an instant boost in your reading speed. And part of the reason why people get an instant boost when they start using their hand as a pacer is because they're more focused, and that is the simple reason. One of the things that we find is how some people will go back to reread material. I'm sure you've done this before. I've done it. Everybody's done it. You read a paragraph and then you're like, what did I just read? Let me go back and reread it. Well, when people are using their hand or a pen as a guide, as a pacer, they're not going back as much. And it's because they're better focused. So I want you to think about using your hand as a pacer. And I know that's not practical, like if you're reading a PDF on the screen, or if you're reading on your iPad, that's not very practical. You don't want to use your hand, right? On an iPad, that's going to move the screen around. We'll talk about reading on the screen in a moment. If you've got a Kindle, you can do it. And I have a Kindle, and when I'm reading, I usually use my hand. Not usually, almost all the time, I'm using my hand to guide my eyes as I'm reading. It's always going to help me read a little faster, and it's going to help me focus better, especially when you have very, very long paragraphs. I don't know about you, but before I started using my hand to guide my eyes, when I would get a really long paragraph in some material that's really, really dry and boring, all of a sudden I'd start zoning out. Halfway through the paragraph, I would just start staring at the paragraph. You ever have this happen to you where you're just staring at a blizzard of words and all of a sudden you got to snap out of it and you're like, wait, where was I? Let me go back. And when you're using your hand, this doesn't happen as often. So try to utilize that when you're reading. That's the simplest way you can improve your concentration and your comprehension and your speed while you're reading. Use your hand. Tip number 4. This has to do with reading on the computer screen. Use accelerator.com. This is actually a web-based application that Iris has developed. It's a free speed reading tool. And I actually want to show you how it works right now live in this webinar. So let me jump over to the browser. Let's take a sample article from America's finest news source, The Onion. Oh boy. How do I get rid of this? There we go. Of course, distractions on the internet. When we're trying to read on the internet, we have distractions like that. So here's an article from The Onion. New study finds that 85% of Americans don't know all the dance moves to the national anthem. All right, let's read this very, very serious article. And we're going to read it using the Accelerator application. So what you simply do is you highlight all the material that you want to read. I'm going to start at the bottom here. I'm going to highlight that all the way up to here. And then you copy the material you want to read. Now, at this point, you can open up another tab or just go to the website accelerator.com and you paste your information in that text box. This is a very easy app to use. After you paste that, you click read, and you'll notice a couple of words are showing here. Here's what you do. You set your settings. How fast do you want to go? That's the words per minute area right here. We've got it set to 300 words a minute, and also chunk size, words. How many words do you want to see at a time? Right now it's set to 2. All these other things are not as important. You know, font color, how big you want the text. Let's say we save this at 300 words a minute, and we're going to hit play. I want you to read this article, which is about a new study finding 85% of Americans don't know all the dance moves to the national anthem. All right, let's read this using Accelerator. I want you to start at the middle of the screen, and we're just going to read it. Okay, you guys get the idea. Now, we can change the settings here, and hopefully you were able to read that. That was at 300 words a minute. Now, if it's kind of skipped around while you're doing this webinar, it could be because if it didn't go at a consistent pace, that could be simply because the internet connection. But I promise you, if you go to accelerator.com, this will work very, very easily for you. Now, what if we change it to 3 words at a time? You're perfectly capable of reading 3 words at a time. Let's try this out. Actually, let's raise the speed. Let's go to 400 words a minute. And 400 words a minute, by the way, is double the average reading speed. The average person reads 200 words a minute. Let's try that out. And for those of you that haven't taken one of our speed reading courses, you might find yourself instantly doubling your reading speed now because you're using this kind of an application. Let's try it out. 400 words a minute, 3 words at a time. All right, you guys get the idea. Now, here's how this helps you out with concentration. First of all, you are staring in one single part of the page. You are not scrolling around and running into ads on the side, this crying baby over here, this ad up here that's moving around, and they move these ads around because they know your eyes are naturally attracted to motion. That's why we said we like to use our hand when we're reading on a physical page. Well, advertisers know this, and they'll create some ads that move around to distract you. Well, we don't want to be distracted. So what we can do is we can take this information out of this website, and this works with any kind of text that you can copy and paste from a web page, from your email, from a PDF, a Word document, anything. You copy and paste it, and you put it in this Accelerator, and it's a very useful tool. By the way, if you're using Accelerator already, check out the bookmarklet if you haven't done so already. Let me show you how the bookmarklet works. You click on the bookmarklet, and it's a faster way to get to this application. You take this and you drag it up to your bookmarks bar, like that. And then the next time you have to read something, let's say this, all you have to do is highlight the text and then hit that button. And it copy and pastes it for you. You don't have to do that extra step. And then you can just click read, and it'll remember your settings from last time. So try this speed reading tool out. I think you'll find it very useful. This is a tool that we developed. It's absolutely free. We are not planning to charge for it, and I hope you find it very useful. I think that, to me, this is a great way to concentrate while I'm reading text on the screen because it's so easy to get distracted by all the other stuff going on this page. So let's go back to the slides for a moment here. Hopefully you guys can see that. And let's talk about tip number 5. Tip number 5 is to take systematic breaks. Now, what I mean by that is, think about just like when you exercise. You don't just exercise for 2 hours straight or an hour and a half. It's a good idea usually to take breaks here and there between sets. And here's how you might take systematic breaks while reading. Now, these are all just ideas. So one idea and you could use the one that works best for you. Try reading for 25 minutes and then taking a 5-minute rest. Try reading for 15 minutes. Take a 5-minute rest. You can do one or the other. So maybe you want to do 25 minutes of reading and 5 minutes of rest, or maybe you want to use 15 minutes of reading and 5 minutes of rest if you have a lower attention span, or maybe you really have to get a lot of reading done and you've got to do a whole 55 minutes of reading and a 5-minute rest. Well, or you can do 45 minutes of reading and a 15-minute rest. Use whatever works best for you based on your situation, but this rest period, you can also use it for note-taking. That's a really good way to maximize that time. So when I say 5-minute rest, I don't mean like take a 5-minute nap or just start getting on a distracting website. You can utilize that time to take some notes. And the great thing about doing that, it activates another part of your brain, and it'll help you remember the material better. So taking systematic breaks, whatever way that you choose, this is a great way to kind of keep your focus while you're reading. Now, here's where a lot of people, and especially a lot of students, will make mistakes. They've got a ton of reading they have to do. Maybe there's a test tomorrow, and they try to cram, and they'll read for like 3 hours straight, or maybe 2 hours, or maybe even an hour and a half, and they refuse to even get up from their seats during that entire hour and a half. Now, here's what happens. During the first 15 minutes, they're focused, they're in the zone, they're getting the information, they're remembering it well, and then what happens after about 15, 20 minutes, it gets harder to focus for long periods of time. We get antsy in our seat. What happens is your level of focus starts to drop off the longer and longer you extend this reading, which is why you need to take breaks every so often. Now, you can also just take a quick 1-minute break. That could be just getting out of your seat, stretching out your neck, stretching out your arms, get the blood flowing a little bit, sit back down and continue. Or maybe it's just looking away from the page every so often after you finish a section. Taking systematic breaks will help you focus better while you're reading. Let's talk about tip number 6. This is a tip that says you should use the read and recall method. Let me explain what that is. The read and recall method, here's one way to do it. You can read a paragraph and then immediately write down what you remember. Or if you want, you can alternatively read a section of your chapter and then write down what you remember. So if you feel very, very distracted, one way you can easily keep your focus is by telling yourself, you know what, I'm going to write something down at the end of every paragraph. Now, if the paragraph is only like 1 sentence or 2 sentences long, you don't have to write anything down. But anything for 3 or more sentences, you're going to write something down. Now, what do you write down? You write down what was that paragraph about, and you use a keyword or a trigger word to remind you what it was about. Now, what you don't want to do when you're using this read and recall method is to read a paragraph and then write down some elaborate sentence that says, this paragraph is about blah, 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 blah. You want to read the paragraph and take a very quick note, maybe a word, no more than 3 words, and maybe it's just a short phrase, and then you continue reading. So you read a paragraph, write something down, read a paragraph, write something down. And here's what happens. If you try doing this compared to regular reading, where people are just reading, if you're reading and immediately recalling, if you know you have to write something down, aren't you going to pay attention a little more? I think most people would, because if you know that you're going to be quizzed on something, or if you know that you have to write something down, you're going to force yourself to pay a little more attention. And this is part of what we have to do. If we're trying to improve our concentration, we have to find ways to kind of trick ourselves into focusing more on the material. So try this read and recall method out. And I'm not suggesting you need to do this every time you read everything. I mean, when I don't feel distracted, I don't do this. But if I feel heavily distracted, for example, a few weeks ago, my mom was going to surgery for a hip replacement surgery. Common surgery. I knew things were going to go well, but I was a little worried. And on that day, I was trying to get some reading done, and I was very distracted because I was worried about my mom. And I was just worried about how the surgery might go and things like that. I found myself unable to read. I kept rereading the same thing over and over again. And what I started doing was, all right, I'm very distracted. Let me try this read and recall method. I'll read a paragraph and immediately write something down. Read another paragraph, write something down. And that helped me focus better, even though I had other things on my mind. And actually, that's the, fact of the matter is, all of us have other things on our mind. And sometimes you have things that are distracting you that you don't have much control over. This is one way to get a little bit of control over it. So you need to really get your focus better. Try this read and recall method. And actually, this is a great way to improve your ability to recall information as well. Not just to concentrate better, but we actually recommend this in our memory workshops. Try this out when you're reading. What I'd recommend for all of you here, if you're trying to improve your ability to remember what you read, try this out for 10 minutes a day, 2 weeks. That'd be a good way to follow up this webinar. You'll really see the power of this very, very simple exercise that you can do. Let's talk about tip number 7. Tip number 7 is use readability.com. Let me show you Readability. Readability is an application that clears away the distractions. Here's the website. This is not developed by us. We don't have any kind of affiliate partnership with them. This is just an application that I use. You can download it. It works on all the browsers. And if you look up in the corner of my browser here, I'm using Google Chrome. They have a Google Chrome extension. Now, you can use this for Google Chrome, the Firefox internet browser, or Safari, or Internet Explorer, and it's very simple to use. Basically, let's go back to that Onion article. Here's how it works. You have an article like this, and you see distractions all over the place. Look, I just hover over this, and it kind of expands on my screen. This is very annoying. I want to limit my distractions, so all I do is I simply click on that readability icon. I click Read Now, and what it will do is it will convert this to something that's a little easier on the eyes, as you can see. But isn't this easier to read than this, right? This is before, this is after, right? And I think everybody would agree. Before and after, this is a lot easier. And the nice thing is you can also change the size of the text over here. So if you want the size to be bigger, there you go. If you want it to be smaller, go ahead. You can change the width and the colors and so on and so forth. Also, there's an option if you have a Kindle, you can send this to your Kindle if you need to. And there's always a printer-friendly version. One of the things that really bothers me is when a web page has a printer-friendly version, and I click on that, and the printer-friendly version is not all that printer-friendly, that gets me very frustrated. Or they print out the article, and it prints out an extra page that just has like a copyright on it. Or they print out the article with the ad that was at the top. That gets me really frustrated. This is going to clear away all your ads, and you'll be nice and focused as you're reading this article. Notice it also keeps your pictures in there. So, use readability.com. Let's go back to our slides real quick. That was tip number 7. Let's talk about tip number 8. Do not multitask. So here's a good example of someone doing some serious multitasking. Showering, coffee, newspaper. He's already got a suit on. Maybe he went to bed with the suit on already. Now, this is where people try to be a little too efficient. There are various studies, and I'm sure some of you even know about this already, that show that multitasking is usually a bad idea in a lot of situations. And by that I mean sometimes you focus on so many things that you don't get any of them done. And you may have had this happen to you. Maybe you had a day where you felt extremely busy. You were really busy, beginning of the day all the way to the end of the day. But you feel like at the end of the day, man, the day went by fast, and I feel like I got nothing done, even though you were busy all day. This is an example of maybe getting a little stuff done here, a little stuff done here, a little stuff done here. What if you just focused on one thing at a time? And unfortunately, in a lot of corporate environments, sometimes employees are kind of almost forced to multitask, and they can sometimes decrease productivity. With reading, you could also decrease your productivity if you try to multitask. Try reading from your textbook while the teacher is lecturing, and in the other ear you've got some music on, and you're also trying to take notes. This is a little too much. Multitasking can lead to horrible focus, and you need to avoid that. Try single tasking instead. Let's talk about tip number 9. If you feel heavily distracted, try to mind map the chapter. Mind mapping is a great way to kind of plot out the ideas and find out what is this really about. Now, the example on the left side is a very basic general mind map. This is where you would just put words in there. The one on the right is a lot more visual. If you can create a visual mind map, that's actually going to help you remember things better. And the reason why you would use mind mapping, here's how you can actually go about using it. Anytime you feel heavily distracted, you can try mind mapping your chapter. Let's say sometimes you just can't read. You've got other things on your mind and you need to kind of get into the zone, or you need to kind of warm up your brain. So if you've got this long chapter that you need to read, why not just flip through the chapter first, look at the headings, look at the subheadings, notice the structure of the chapter, and while you're doing that, you create this little mind map, maybe on a separate page. Or if you see on the bottom here, one of the applications I recommend for using for creating mind maps is mindmeister.com. I'll actually show you this right now. Mindmeister.com is, I've used a number of mind mapping applications. This one is my favorite one so far. Here's how you use the application. See, I've got a number of mind maps here. You can also set up folders and so on. If I click on New Mind Map, it'll give me some options here. Here are some templates. A blank mind map. There's also, some people use mind mapping for brainstorming, as you can see here. Some people use it for project planning, SWOT analysis, a meeting, a to-do list. Well, let's just start with a basic mind map, because let's say we're mind mapping a chapter in order to improve our focus. So we're heavily distracted, and I don't know, let's say this is a chapter on marketing. And section number 1, let's say, is talking about advertising. And within advertising, there's traditional advertising, which might be billboards. And within advertising now, you also have internet advertising. I see those sections because they're in boldface words. And maybe they might talk, within internet advertising, they might talk about display ads. They might talk about pay-per-click ads. Well, let's say there's other areas that are talked about as well, other than advertising. Maybe they're also talking about, I don't know, let's say word-of-mouth marketing. You can see how easy it is to create these mind maps and add details. Now, some other functionality you can add is you can take notes in the section here. If something needs to be more than a few words, you can just take some notes there, and you can add that, as you see right there. You can also add links. Let's say you want to link this to another page. Let's say you want to link it to, I don't know, a Wikipedia article on advertising. You could simply copy that link, go back to this application, paste the link in there, and now we've got a link associated with this idea. I can click it, and it takes me to that. So you can also add, by the way, files. Maybe you want to attach a PDF here. Some people use mind maps for doing tasks, but the idea behind mind mapping is actually it helps you remember things better, but it can help you focus better if you start off mind mapping your chapter. This is a good way to sometimes get your brain warmed up before you read. So you flip through the chapter, you're looking at headings, you're looking at subheadings, boldface words, start creating this mind map. Now you know what you're about to read. Now when you get into the reading phase of things, you can focus better because you know where the chapter's going, you've mind mapped it, and most people just start reading a chapter beginning to end, and they'll take notes here and there. This is a good way to improve your focus while you're reading. So check out MindMeister. This is not an Iris app. This is actually, I think, developed by a German team, hence the name. Great mind mapping tool, one of my favorite. Let's talk about another tip. Tip number 10, set deadlines. Deadlines help you focus. Here's what I mean by that. I want you to think back to the last time you had to write a paper for school. Let's say it was an 8-page paper and it was due 3 weeks from now. I don't think any of us started that paper that day. We kind of waited, we procrastinated, we got it done maybe a few days before or maybe even the day before or the night before. And what happens when, I want you to think about this. This happened to me. I had this 8-page paper that was due on a Monday. It had to be done by midnight. The professor wanted it emailed to him. So he said, if it's in my inbox after midnight, I'm not going to accept it. At 12:01, I'm not accepting these papers. Well, on Friday, going into that weekend, I knew I had to write this paper. I knew what I wanted to write about. I just hadn't sat down yet to start writing. Finally, Saturday comes along. Still haven't done it. And I said, you know what, I'll get this done on Sunday. Sunday comes along, and I actually forgot about the paper until about 9:30 at night. So now I had 2.5 hours to write this paper. All of a sudden, I remembered, got to write this paper. I got 2.5 hours. all of a sudden I sit down and I start focusing on the task at hand. I was single tasking. I got rid of my distractions. And I also had a very firm deadline. I had 2.5 hours to write 8 pages of text. Guess what happened? Somehow, magically, this paper got done. And it got done without any plagiarism. And actually, you know what? It was a pretty good paper, I have to admit. Now, I'm not suggesting you procrastinate, but when you set deadlines, that helps you concentrate better. And you can set deadlines when you read, too. A lot of people don't do this. And this is a good way to actually improve your reading speed, too, but also improve your concentration. For example, the average reading speed is 300, 300. It's 200 words per minute. Let's say you have a book. Maybe it's a nonfiction book or a fiction book. Most books have between 300 to 500 words per page. That's the average. There are some that are above that, some below. But most books are between that range. Let's say your book has 400 words per page. What if you said to yourself, okay, I am comfortable reading at 300 words a minute, but I want to get one page done at a time. And your book has 400 pages approximately. 400 pages. 400 words per page. What if you read one page every minute? And you could simply get a timer that's either online, just search for, do a Google search for like online timer, or get yourself one of those kitchen timers and try to finish a page per minute. Now you would be going faster than you normally go, 400 words a minute, but what you're going to find is your focus is going to improve because you're going to say, you know what, I have to read through this in just 1 minute. And by setting that deadline, you improve your ability to focus. Just like me, when I had 2.5 hours to write that paper, all of a sudden I started focusing on the task at hand and I was getting it done. This will help you to read with a higher level of concentration and probably a higher speed as well. So I want you to try setting deadlines while you're reading. Or instead of a deadline per page, maybe you want to try doing a deadline per chapter. So maybe you want to finish your chapter in 20 minutes or 30 minutes. Set some kind of a deadline. What's the most amount of time you want to be spending on this? I'll give you an example. The one magazine that I do subscribe to is The Economist. All my other news I pretty much get online. And when I get The Economist, I start off and I say, you know what, I've got 15 minutes to get through The Economist. I set myself a very firm deadline. And here's how I get through The Economist in 15 minutes. I basically start with, the first article, and I read the introduction and conclusion to every single article. So I'll read the first and last paragraph. I read the title. If there's a headline there, I read that too. And the first and last paragraph of that article. And then I read the first sentences of every paragraph. Why? Because the first sentences tend to be main ideas. Now, I'm setting this deadline. I've got this clock running for 15 minutes. And I want, after I do that second step of reading all the first sentences of every paragraph, I make a decision. Do I want to read this article later or not? If I want to read the article later, I will circle the title of the article, and I'll read it later. If I don't want to read it, I just cross out the title. And then I move on to the next article. Now, let's say the next article is not interesting at all. I just cross it out, next article. Maybe the next one isn't interesting. Cross it out, next one. Because I'm trying to get through the magazine in 15 minutes. This is what I do every single week with The Economist. When I find an article that actually slightly interests me, I'll read the title, I'll read the first and last paragraph, I'll read the first sentences of the paragraph, and then I'll move on to the next one. But I'll make a decision. Do I want to read this later? So that's how I spend my 15 minutes getting through The Economist. Now, later on when I have more time to read, because I usually get The Economist at the office, when I have more time to read, what do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to go back, I'm going to reread every single one of those articles that I circled. And you see how by setting deadlines, I can make sure that I'm not spending more than 15 minutes reading The Economist at work because I shouldn't, because I should be working, right? But I do want to stay on top of the news, and I want to know what's happening in the world. So this is how I get through The Economist quickly and filter out all the articles that I'm not interested in and decide on which articles I actually want to read. So this is one example of how you could set deadline. Actually, we talked about a number of examples. Set a deadline per page, maybe a minute per page, or 2 minutes per page if you've got a bunch of text on there. Or set a deadline of, maybe it's not a minute, maybe it's a minute and 10 seconds per page. Set that deadline either per page, or set a deadline for the chapter, or set a deadline for a magazine. How long do you want to get through? What's the most amount of time you want to spend on this and optimize your reading strategy for that? Let's talk about tip number 11. Finding your ideal reading place. Here's what I mean by that. Some people prefer to study in different environments. By study, I don't just mean study. I know that not all of you that are in attendance today are students. Some of you are done with school and you're professionals. You're doing a lot of reading maybe at work or personal reading yourself. Find a place where you can really, really focus. Now, that might be a library. It could be a library. Some people focus better at coffee shops when they're reading at a cafe. Some people, they focus better just at home, and maybe their home office. You want to find the best place where you can really, really focus on your reading. Some people find the best place for them to focus while reading is at night after the day is over and when everything's slowed down and they're about to go to bed. Now, that could be bad for some people. For me, if I try to read while I'm going to bed, I'm just going to fall asleep because I'm laying on the bed. So you want to pick and find out where's the place where I concentrate best when I'm reading. Maybe it's somewhere within your house. Is it the kitchen? Or maybe it's not the kitchen because too many people. Maybe it's the bedroom, or maybe it's another room. Somewhere where you can really, really focus. And if you have that same place where you always get your reading done, you'll find yourself much more productive. You'll find yourself concentrating a lot better. Tip number 12, get into the habit of reading at the same time every single day. So here's an example. If you're no longer taking classes in school like me, I've been done with school for a while, what you might want to try doing is reading at the same time every single day. So I kind of have a routine where I'll wake up in the morning and maybe I'll take a good half an hour just to read in the morning, distraction free. Try to get up early before maybe anybody else gets up, and that way you don't have anyone distracting you. And it's a good way to kind of start off your day. Now you might say, you know what, the morning is not good for me. I have trouble waking up early and doing that. Maybe the end of the day is the best time for you. Or maybe you have a long commute on a train and you're not driving. You don't want to be reading while driving. I should put that disclaimer in here before we start getting lawsuits. Let's say you take the train to work and it's a half an hour train ride. Well, that means you can get an hour of reading done every single day on that train ride. And that is your time to just focus on reading material and get as much reading as you can get done. You'll find that if you get into this habit of kind of reading at the same time all the time, maybe it's on the train, or maybe it's first thing in the morning, or maybe it's during your lunch break after you're done eating your lunch and maybe you have some time left over. Find a time of your day, or maybe several times in the day, where you can focus on your reading, and that becomes your habit. And once it becomes your habit, you'll focus better because okay, this is the time I'm on the train. This is when I start getting my reading done. It's time to focus. It'll help you out greatly. Tip number 13 is to use mental checkpoints while reading. Here's what I mean by this. A lot of us, when we're reading, every so often, we start to lose focus. And sometimes we have to reread material because we didn't understand it. And here's commonly what happens. You're reading along, and all of a sudden your brain starts wandering off, and then you start thinking of other things, but you're still reading. They call this mindless reading, by the way, where you're still going like line by line, but nothing is sinking in. You're actually thinking of other things, but you're still moving through the text. Finally, what happens? You catch yourself. You say, okay, I got to go back. I got to reread some material. Well, where do you go back to? Do you know how long your brain has been wandering off? Probably not, because if you knew when your brain started to wander off, you would catch yourself right away and say, hey, focus on this material. So here's how you use a mental checkpoint. When I'm reading through, let's say it's a chapter in a nonfiction book. When I finish a section in that book, and by section I mean maybe I get to a part of the book where a new heading shows up or a new subheading. That's the end of the section for me. After I finish that section, I stop for a moment and I think to myself, hello, still there? Are you focused? Did you get all that? Okay, good. Continue reading. And if you were focused, you continue reading. Now let's say I check myself. I do this mental checkpoint at the end of every section in the book. Once my brain starts wandering off, let's say I checked myself at the end of section 1, and now I'm reading section 2, and there goes my focus, and I'm thinking of other things. I'm thinking about things that have no relation to what I'm reading, and finally I catch myself, and I tell myself, you got to go back and reread what you thought you were reading. Where do I go back to? I just go back to my mental checkpoint, the last area where I checked to see if I was still focused. So mental checkpoints can kind of improve your efficiency while you're reading, and they help you concentrate better. Let's talk about this is tip number 14. This is the Stay Focused app. want to show you this application because I find it very useful. I actually uninstalled it from my browser for the moment, but I'm going to reinstall it just so I can show you how it gets installed and how you can set it up. So this app is called the Stay Focused app, and it works. I don't know if you're using Firefox. I don't know if this works with Firefox. It may work with Firefox, but I know it works with Google Chrome. So what you do, if you don't have the Google Chrome browser, I highly recommend it. It's a very, very fast browser. Firefox is a good browser. Safari is good. You know, well, I don't know, maybe you're using Internet Explorer. But the nice thing about Google Chrome and Firefox, Firefox has add-ons and Google Chrome has extensions. You can think of these as like apps for your browser. Well, with Focus, there's an app for that. And I want to show you this app. If you have the Google Chrome browser, you can do a Google search for Google Chrome extensions. And this is the Google Chrome web store. And you can see there's all these applications that you can try to find, business tools, education, and so on, productivity. Definitely browse this, but when you get here, search for Stay Focused. Let me show you this application. It's right over here. And I like this application a lot. You can add it to Chrome. You click Add. And you see it showed up right at the top here. This is where, if you're using Google Chrome, this is where your Google Chrome extensions are. Now, if I right-click on that, and I click on Options, here's what this application allows me to do. You see this area right here. It says maximum time allowed per day. So what you're doing is you're setting up like a parental block for yourself, essentially, to improve your focus. So it says here, set the maximum number of minutes per day that you will be allowed to browse the sites on your blocked sites list. Your blocked sites list is over here in this area. You can set whatever sites you want to block, but actually, you're not blocking those sites. You're just saying, okay, give me 10 minutes per day for those sites. So by default, it's set to 10 minutes, but you can change that to 5 or change it to 7, or you can add more to maybe 15. Let's say it's on 10 minutes, and you click Set. Okay. Now, I need to block certain sites, so I need to decide which sites do I want to block. Now, here's what I mean by block. Remember we talked earlier about getting rid of distractions online, and we talked about how YouTube could be a distraction, Facebook could be a distraction, your email could be a distraction. When you go to blocked sites, you enter the websites that you feel very distracted by. So you might put facebook.com here. You might put youtube.com and any other sites that you want. And then you click Add Blocked Sites. And now your settings have automatically been updated. Now, here's how the application works. You see how this little app right here, the Stay Focused app, is currently blue? What you'll notice is that when you go to one of these sites that you added, Facebook or YouTube, it'll turn red. So watch, I'm going to go to YouTube right now. And you see the application now turned red. If I click on it, you'll see what it says. Time remaining. So it's counting down from the 10 minutes that I had. Now, by the way, this 10 minutes is not just for YouTube. This is 10 minutes for all of the sites that I put on my blocked list. Now I can say, all right, well, I'm setting a timer and I've only got 10 minutes to be on YouTube. I'm distracted myself. I'm looking at YouTube videos. Somebody sent me one that was really funny, blah, blah, blah. And then I go to Facebook and you'll see the same thing happens. Now, it doesn't happen on all sites. If I go to, let me show you, if I go to the irisreading.com website, it doesn't happen there because I didn't set it as a blocked site. But if I go to Facebook, you'll see it turns red. And now the countdown is beginning. Now, let's say that your countdown, all of a sudden you're like, oh boy, I need more time than 9 minutes left on Facebook. Yeah, try going into your options and changing that. Well, you can go to the max time allowed, and let's say you want 15 minutes instead of 10 minutes. If I click Set, watch what happens. A little dialog box pops up, and it says, you're trying to give yourself more time. You sure that's a good idea? Maybe you should reconsider. Are you sure you want to increase the maximum time allowed? And I might say, yeah, I do. And then it says, seriously, dude, the whole point of this extension is to stop you from procrastinating. You're only hurting yourself, and the kitten gets an electric shock every time you click OK. Are you sure you can live with yourself? And I'll click OK. And then you hear meow. I hope you're happy. I click OK. Your settings have been updated. So they basically give you this giant guilt trip if you try to extend the amount of time that you have. Let's say I wanted to add this to 20, and we'll basically get the same thing. So what if I cut it down? Let's say I'm going to cut it down to 1 minute. Let's say I say, all right, let's see what happens when time runs out. You see how I cut it down to 1 minute? It says you're giving yourself less time. Slow clap. Well played, my friend. Your settings have been updated. Nice. Now, what will happen once I get to the Facebook page? You see how it's counting down. Uh-oh, I've only got 6 seconds remaining. 5, 4, 3, and now I'm not going to be able to access the site anymore, and it'll show me something else. Shouldn't you be working? Which is, if I go to YouTube, same thing will show up. I go to YouTube, and it's not going to let me. Now, this is a really good way to stay focused on not just material you might need to read, but just focused in general. I highly recommend this app. This is the Stay Focused app. Now, if you wanted to change the settings, let's say you really needed to get on Facebook, which you don't really need to get on Facebook. Let's say you really need to get on one of these blocked sites. You can always just right-click here and remove from Chrome. And if you do that, that's pretty much cheating, but you'll be able to still get on sites like Facebook. So it doesn't block it for eternity. It actually just blocks it for 24 hours. And tomorrow you'll get another 10 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever you set. But I highly recommend the Stay Focused app because it does help you focus more. I think it helps you focus more on reading as well, because if you're reading and you've got a computer screen in front of you, it's very easy to just stop reading, get on the computer, check Facebook, or get on the computer and check your email. And by the way, we did actually a webinar. If you missed it, it was a great webinar on email management techniques. So it was email management, how to read and respond to your email faster. And one of the things that we talked about in that webinar was don't become an email zombie. Don't check your email 20 times a day. Maybe set a dedicated time when you check email, maybe just once or twice a day, or 3 times a day. And also set some deadlines. How long do you want to be checking your email for? This helps not only with email, but setting deadlines, as we discussed earlier, helps you concentrate better while you're reading. So keep that in mind. Tip number 15 is listening to music while you read. Now, this is another tip that I recommend to people, but I want you to know some of the research behind this. There's no conclusive research that says listening to music helps you concentrate better while reading. The reason why I'm mentioning that is, and this might seem counterintuitive because I'm putting it down as a tip, there was some initial research years ago that said listening to music does help you concentrate better while you're reading. And then there was some more research that came out later that refuted that previous research. So right now it's basically not an established fact. But anecdotally, some people will say, you know what, I focus better when I'm reading and listening to some music. Now, if you're wondering what kind of music typically helps people concentrate better, usually it's something without lyrics, something instrumental, something like maybe classical music. So try it. What I recommend is you try it out for yourself. Now, there is some evidence that shows that listening to music before you start reading or before you start doing a certain kind of a task can kind of help you do that task more productively later on. So you might want to try an alternative, maybe listening to some music. It kind of gets you in a certain kind of a mood. Maybe it gets you in the zone. You know, sometimes music can be very inspiring. You hear a song and that motivates you. Or you might hear a song and it makes you really sad. So think about if a song kind of inspires you or motivates you. Maybe that'll motivate you to get through that chapter. And you might listen to music before you start reading, and then after the song is over, you start reading without music. That might help you. So what I'd recommend is try it out, see what works best for you in terms of concentration. And how will you know what works best for you in terms of concentration? Try reading for 5 minutes with music. Try reading 5 minutes without music and see what works best. Or try listening to music before you start reading and then without music after that. And again, see what works best. So to summarize, we covered a lot of tips today. We covered 15 in total. Just to go through them quickly, tip number 1, focus on the task at hand. Tip number 2, get rid of distractions. Tip number 3, use your hand as a pacer. Tip number 4, use the Accelerator app. Tip number 5, take systematic breaks. Very helpful. Tip number 6, use the read and recall method. That's when you read a paragraph and immediately write something down. Use readability. If you do a lot of online reading, clear out that page and remove all those distractions, all those annoying ads all over the place, and just read the material. Tip number 8, do not multitask. Try single tasking instead. Try focusing at one thing on one thing at a time. Tip number 9 was, if you're heavily distracted, try mind mapping the chapter first before you start reading. And you can use MindMeister.com as a nice mind mapping web-based tool. And by the way, MindMeister also has an iPad, an iPhone, and an Android app. Tip number 10, set deadlines. Deadlines simply help you focus. Maybe a minute a page, maybe a certain amount of time per chapter, or maybe 15 minutes for the magazine. Like I gave you that example of The Economist. Tip number 11 was find your ideal place to get some reading done. Maybe that's the library, a cafe, maybe it's your home office, and you want to get into the habit of reading every day at the same time if you can. Set aside designated periods of time. That'll help you concentrate a lot better. And also use mental checkpoints while you're reading. What I mean by that was reading a section and then stopping to check if your focus is still there. It's going to help you know where to go back if you need to go back, and it helps you concentrate better. And I also showed you the Stay Focused app. Very useful if you're trying to get things done, not just from a standpoint of reading, but helps you concentrate better, I think, overall, because you know that you have that deadline of only got 10 minutes on Facebook or 10 minutes on YouTube. And tip number 15 was try implementing music into your reading. Maybe listen to music before you start reading, or maybe during. Find out what works best for you. But I want to thank you all for checking out our webinar today. Check out our other webinars. There's a link posted in the chat area where you can check out our other ones. If you missed any of the previous ones, we have recordings of them and also PDF summary guides. And if you haven't taken advantage of the webinar package, definitely check that out. It's nicely discounted. And also know that we're going to be doing another series of 10 webinars. You'll hear what the subject and theme of it is going to be. It's going to be very, very interesting. It's based on a lot of the feedback we've been getting from these webinars and other things that people want. So thank you again for checking out the webinar, and I hope you have a great day.